The same week that the US enacted a new law accusing all businesses in Xinjiang of slave labour and banning their import, California rejects a move to end the slave labour of prisoners in the state. China has announced new regulations requiring live streamers to dress respectfully and to not offer professional advice unless they're qualified to do so. But is the West happy? And the US Congress now has a new target for human rights allegations: China's LGBT population. But hasn't the Supreme Court just suggested that gay rights could be the next target after Roe v. Wade was struck down? Let's get reporting. Hello, 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。Hey you guys, welcome back to Reports on China. I'm Andy. Last week, the US enacted their latest weapon against the Uyghur people of China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. A new law accusing all businesses in the region of slave labour and banning their import into the United States without clear evidence proving a negative. If you're new to the channel, there's absolutely zero credible evidence of slave labour in Xinjiang, and those allegations have been debunked multiple times by credible, independent sources. What there is ample evidence of, though, is slave labour in the United States. In fact, the country's constitution specifically allows the slave labour of prisoners across the country, where men and women are forced into working in the field, in factories, and wherever else as punishment for their crimes. Awkwardly, on the same week the US enacted that law accusing Xinjiang companies of slave labour with zero evidence, a proposal by some state lawmakers in California to end prison slave labour there was rejected by the government. As the Washington Post reports, a proposal aimed at removing the last remnant of slavery from California law failed to pass the state Senate on Thursday after Governor Gavin Newsom's administration warned it could cost taxpayers billions of dollars by forcing the state to pay prisoners a $15 per hour minimum wage. In other words, governments across the United States literally view slave labour as an integral part of their economies. Governor Newsom said that paying for the slave labour they utilise from prisoners would cost about $1.5 billion per year. Now that means that in the state of California alone, slaves are forced to work 100 million hours per year, labour that states cannot afford to pay for but desperately need. If we calculated those numbers using the average 40-hour work week, California's government alone has nearly 50,000 full-time slaves. That means it's very fair to argue that governments all across the United States, while accusing other nations of slave labour with absolutely zero evidence, are completely reliant and unable to give up on slavery, all the while accusing other places of slavery. You guys make me sick. China has announced some new regulations for live streamers to help ensure the internet is a safe place for everyone. Some of my favourite new rules include the need for live streamers to ensure that their outfits, makeup, language, behaviour, body movements and screen image shall be civilised and decent. The requirement that they not discriminate based on race, nationality, region, gender, occupation, physical or mental disability, that they don't promote fake and shoddy goods or engage in sexually suggestive or sexually provocative behaviour. But my favourite new regulation would have to be the requirement that live streamers not offer professional advice in areas where they have zero qualifications. Do you guys remember that nude model Jennifer McCarthy? She's the US celebrity who popularised the ludicrous idea that vaccinations cause autism, which spread like wildfire and led to a huge proportion of people in the English-speaking world putting themselves and others in danger by refusing to vaccinate their children for conditions that can potentially kill. In China, thanks to this new regulation, Jennifer McCarthy and her pseudo-science would be blocked, and rightfully so. Article 13 of the new regulation says, for live broadcast content that requires a higher professional level, such as medical and healthcare, finance, law, education, the anchor should obtain the corresponding practice qualifications and report the practice qualification to the live broadcast platform. Honestly, these rules are extremely fair and necessary. But what does the West think? Well, pretty soon after the announcement of the new regulation, Twitter comments like this began to appear. people don't realize this will be used to further control what Chinese people can say. It will only be used to arrest people that the CPC views as unqualified when they dissent against government views. So typical. Of course it will limit what Chinese people can say. That's the whole idea. Now China has less chance of charlatans like former Playboy model Jennifer McCarthy, pretending she knows anything about medicine or science and dangerously influencing millions. Courts were dramatic, as usual, with their headline, China sends a fresh warning to its booming livestream industry. The article says, unlike more traditional media outlets, live streams are ephemeral and potentially harder to monitor, and therefore more worrying for a state that likes to maintain an iron grip over the political narrative. Note the use of the term iron grip, which is specifically reserved to talk about governments like China and Russia, and never about the US, UK or Australia. Typical. The US Congress reportedly delayed the release of a human rights report on China recently because they were torn on how to address so-called human rights abuses of China's LGBT people. Foreign Policy ran with the headline, Congress splits over how to address LGBT rights in China. Well, that's awkward, since a member of the Supreme Court has indicated he may try to repeal gay rights there after their success overturning Roe v. Wade and removing federal bans on abortion. But firstly, what the actual f***? China does not have a widespread issue with LGBT people being attacked, denied work, or otherwise discriminated against. China's cultural context is much, much different to the West, so you can't just look at the fact that China doesn't have LGBT pride parades with half-naked people gyrating down the main street as evidence of homophobia or anything else. The very idea of pride itself is something that doesn't really work here in China, a culture where sexuality is a private matter and not something to be announced to the world or screamed from the rooftops. Also, as opposed to the West, where LGBT identity is a huge defining factor for many who aren't straight, it is only a small part of the lives of many LGBT people here in China, who view themselves not as center of the world, all-important individuals, but as part of a wider society of friends, family, workmates, neighbors, and so on. In China, gay men will not be beaten to a pulp on the street, something that happens very, very regularly in the West, despite many people holding the belief that it's the West that is accepting and welcoming of diversity. As CNBC reports, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas says gay rights contraception rulings should be considered after Roe is overturned. So perhaps China should be offering some suggestions to the US in terms of LGBT rights. They certainly need it now. Anyway, you guys, that's all I have time for today. But as usual, do let me know what you think down below in the comment section, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.